So hello everyone, and thank you for coming to the political turmoil in Turkey. My name is Onur Romano, and I am the co-organizer of CFIC Victoria branch. I'm a branch manager of the CFIC virtual branch and a board member. CFIC is Canada's only national nonprofit with the mission of promoting and educating the public on critical thinking, science, and secularism. We help people to make decisions based on evidence, rational thinking, and compassion. In alignment with our mission, we hold events like these to provide an opportunity for subject matter experts, intellects, and free thinkers to engage with you. Most recently, we have moved many of these events online. To minimize background noise, we have put everyone on mute. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. I myself will be moderating, and I will acknowledge that I've seen your raised hand by writing your name in the chat window. And when the opportunity presents itself, you will be unmuted and have the opportunity to ask a question. We rely entirely on donations and memberships to allow us to bring you such events as this. Please visit our website and email me for more information about how to become a member or make a donation. Today, we will talk about the political turmoil in Turkey through the domestic and international lens. Our guest, Cagri Sakir, is a graduate student living in Ankara, Turkey. He is interested in local and international politics. Cagri Sakir is working as a software developer in an IT company. He is interested in local and international politics. He follows news and tries to do it from various sources to learn the imperial truth. Cagri Sakir and myself are both members of the Association of Atheism Turkey. Today, we will be discussing several topics about Turkey and Erdogan. So welcome, Cagri. Your video is off. If you can start it.
Yep.
Welcome, Cagri. How are you?
Fine. At the beginning, I should give this disclaimer. I do not represent my university educational institution or my company in any way during this program.
And neither of us also do not represent the Association of Atheism, or it's not their views. It's our personal views, what we will be discussing today.
Exactly. Yes.
So with this disclaimer behind us, I say we proceed because we have lots and lots of topics to go through, and I will do this like in a Q&A format. So first, perhaps we should start with the domestic issues, and after we discuss some 4 or 5 top domestic issues, then we can move into international issues. So as a teaser, as a spoiler, I will just tell you what topics we will be discussing. We will be discussing what is FETÖ, the Fethullah Gülen movement. So first we will be talking about this, and then we will move on to the failure to govern and pass it over to the incoming generation. In Erdogan's case, that's what we will discuss. And then we will move on to the education and collaboration with the Islamic entities, foundations. And then we will discuss the post-corona pandemic and how did the Turkish government handle it and how it is handling from many aspects. And then we will move on to the new social media censorship law in Turkey. And then we will be discussing the economic issues. And we have an update today. The Minister of Economy has resigned, which is Tayyip Erdogan's son-in-law. So he resigned. So yeah, we will also talk about that. And then we will move on to Erdogan's hidden wealth.
We can,
we will elaborate a little bit on that, and then we will move on to the international issues such as the Eastern Mediterranean crisis, the Greek island Cyprus, the natural gas and petroleum searches, and the Libya situation, and then the Syria situation, and then there is the Azerbaijan and Armenia conflict,
Yeah.
and then we will finish off with the Charlie Hebdo and Erdogan's response, and with Macron and Erdogan, the French president and Turkish president. So that will be
And maybe
our,
with American elections as well. Yeah, well,
yeah,
news
American
in Turkey
elections, I
never
believe.
fail. Yeah.
Yeah. So that can wait. So yeah, let's start off with the Fethullah Gülen, because for those who are not familiar, Fethullah Gülen has become a big thing in Turkish politics for the past 5 decades, if I may say. It
Mhm.
started off way back, and then it developed, it got stronger, it got rooted out, and the movement itself uh, was mostly, I believe, got its like the rooting period was, I believe, in North Africa. That's where the Gulen movement opened their charities and schools, and trained their generation of
Followers.
bureaucrats,
Mhm.
diplomats. Yeah. So
Mhm.
and
And then
those
Central
people later
Asia as
on,
well.
yeah, those people later on have become um, the important people in Turkey, and then he
Mhm.
ended up having total control, total, absolute control. And then with a coup attempt, his control was kind of tried to cut off. But let's discuss how did it turn out. So, how did Fethullah Gülen infiltrate government positions? And yeah, so like how did that play out, and how did the AKP government, Erdogan's
Mhm.
party, use FETÖ movement to seize total control of the government institutions? um, yeah, what do you think about that?
Well, FETÖ is known to be, like before AKP and before the rise of the Islamist parties in 1990s. Like FETÖ had already begun infiltrating into government positions and basically in the army, etc. But like other like previous governments weren't really promoting them that much, weren't really giving them priority, etc. But in when Islamists came into power in 1994 first in local elections, and then in 2002 with the rise of AKP into power, AKP basically used its FETÖ followers, you know, as a way to get support from bureaucrats in the bureaucracy, and not only in the bureaucracy, also in the army as well, because like there were army officers, members of FETÖ as well. So and basically AKP decided to discharge members of higher ranking members of the army, replacing them with fast promotions of FETÖ members, replace the same thing in the all around the bureaucracy, in ministries, etc. In ministries is kind of easier, but yeah, so discharging bureaucrats of previous governments and like replacing them with mostly FETÖ members, giving them kind of priority in FETÖ, and like as a result, when we came to 2013 or 14, they basically became almost as powerful as the party itself in
Not
government.
only that, but if I remember correctly, around that time they also became one.
But
AKP and FETÖ was kind of indistinguishable from each other, because they were
well, they
very
were like
closely
cake and
integrated.
the flour. Yes, you can
Yeah.
say that. You can say that they were like cake and the flour. So we can say basically like most of the bureaucrats supporting AKP were kind of FETÖ members, and like yeah, so at the end they try to AKP is trying to put a stance against FETÖ, but still it's kind of hard, because it's hard to get the flour out of the cake, right?
And
Even Erdogan personally said like that he is basically there were like prosecutors, known FETÖ members who were prosecuting against army officers, high-ranking army officers of that time, and like Erdogan himself had said that he is the actual prosecutor of those cases. And like when this mischief began between them, he said publicly that what did they want that we didn't give to them. That's
yeah,
that's a very well-known
so it is
statement.
a
So
fact. It is a fact. We can say that they were partners in crime. And, I mean, that includes anything from fast discharges of high ranking military personnel to election frauds to, many things, education
mhm.
and money laundering, many things. However, uh, what happened? Why did they have beef? And what was that power struggle about? Why, such a nice, force united, combined their forces and kind of overthrow the secular republic. They started the second republic. That's what we can say. I believe, personally, and that's how strong they were. What happened? What was the power struggle?
Well, then it in as I remember, it was in 2013. Like FETÖ also had a hold in like educational institutes, and actually later on it was found out that FETÖ members were also they were also officers in the National Examination Center, and then these people basically gave the questions of national examinations that rank students for university entrance, for example, in advance to their own educational institutes, so that they create an artificial advantage for their own students. So yes, so basically they were also very powerful in education as well. And then the AKP decided to shut down all the cram schools, basically. And in cram schools, basically all FETÖ, like there are many cram school chains linked with FETÖ. And so basically it's I think it's one of the things that started the mischief. But then it's basically came out clearly, it's accumulated. And then when there have been corruption cases at the end of 2013, it was the most clear case that proves that there is a problem between AKP and FETÖ, because like those huge corruption scandals were being prosecuted by the same prosecutor that Erdogan supported a few years ago. And like they were directly heading to the Erdogan and his family. And Erdogan called this a coup attempt against them, against his family. But still, it was the most clear case in which that started the mischief between AKP and FETÖ. And
So
basically,
before
mhm.
we get to that part, the separation part, and so can we say that what they had hard time to share with is basically the education system and the youth, the next generation. I believe the underlying issue, that's my personal opinion again, but I believe the underlying issue here was that they just could not share who gets to brainwash the next generation. Fethullah Gulen has all these hundreds of schools in Turkey, thousands outside of Turkey. When I say these schools,
Hmm.
they are anything from elementary level to university.
Hmm.
And, you know, that many institutions I'm talking about, not a dozen or two. And
And also not only in Turkey, not only in United States, even in United States, in African countries, in Central
like in
Asian
North
countries,
Africa, yeah,
like not only North Africa, also like Sub-Saharan Africa as well, like
all
in
around the world,
countries, yeah, in countries
except
that you
Russia.
wouldn't
Putin doesn't let him in. But
I mean, in countries that nobody would know where Turkey is, like there were like Turkish schools, like educating people
yeah,
about
he,
Turkey,
he, has,
and
he has this school system, and then there is
mhm,
the Turkish school system, which is more or less can be summarized as around 700,000. No, how many imam schools are there nowadays? So yeah, that's not that many. I'm sorry. So the
uh,
imam schools
four
are
4,000, but
all
their
4,000 schools.
number increased rapidly in the
Yeah, and
last
700,000
5, 6 years.
students.
Hmm.
That's the annual graduates. And
Yeah.
what happens is that I believe the issue was like, am I gonna get these generation into the Imam Hatip, the Imam preacher schools, or the is it gonna be Fethullah's way? So they had very strong disagreements as far as the education curriculum, education system, and school system. So they couldn't basically share the next generation. Also, they also had a disagreement about the number of congressmen they were going to have, because I believe Feto also wanted
Well,
to grant. Uh,
Well, yeah, you know, whether their main point of disagreement was education or not is kind of speculative, but definitely education was a part of it. I could say economy is also kind of part of it because, and media maybe because FETÖ had many, channels and newspapers, etc. as well.
After this, Fethullah's prosecutors started investigating Erdogan and Erdogan's family.
Hmm.
And what was that? It is known as the biggest corruption scandal in world history, with 2.5 plus billion dollars. And Turkey is a poor country, my friends.
Well,
So
yeah.
yeah, so like, the biggest
They try to
corruption
use up
scandal
all
in
the
the world
money, they
ever.
buy houses, and it's still there's some much left, some amount
Yeah,
left.
and since Feto kind of pulled something like that against Erdogan, what it was followed by was that AKP claimed that there was a coup attempt orchestrated by Feto and United States. However,
Hmm.
other foreign sources claim that, like NATO, say that it was a poorly orchestrated play, because like the number one rule, if you are gonna do some critical thinking over this, who benefited from all of that coup thing, and when you look at it from that angle, you may also still think that Erdogan and FETÖ may still be collaborating, may still be in a partnership. But again, that's very speculative.
Hmm.
So AKP used the coup attempt to run a witch hunt and terminate contracts of 100,000 plus government workers who had secured jobs. Those were replaced
Yeah.
by Erdogan supporters. And yeah, please go ahead.
Well, yeah, the coup attempt, the real coup attempt came to, 2016. And after coup attempt, like Erdogan and like AKP said that, okay, we have to clean all these FETÖ members out of the bureaucracy. So we need a emergency case in Turkey, and like we need emergency laws. We need extra authority to fire any, or at least suspend any government employee that we want to. And then, Parliament allowed them. anyway, and then as Onur said, like they fired many, you know, and by many I'm not just saying, you know, thousands, etc. I'm saying, you know, tens of thousands of people, or maybe even more than 100,000 government employees out of government, and of course they were replaced by, you know, people who were AKP supporters, as you can guess, people that they are sure that they weren't FETÖ members anyway.
At that same time, I believe what was happening was that the Turkish constitution was to be amended, to be changed from, and instead of a parliamentary system, a new presidential system was introduced. And after this coup, with that martial law Erdogan put in power, he practically had more powers than even if he had that constitution passed. He suddenly had, all those powers in a pill, just like that, over one night.
Well, yeah, more or less, martial law, all of the authorities of, you know, given extra to the cabinet or to the executive branch by martial law were kind of have become permanent with the new presidential system, more or less. And the presidential system, no, the martial law wasn't cancelled until you know, the presidential system came into force. So basically, since
can you
2016.
Can you please tell our guests, our listeners, viewers, can you tell them a little bit more about the custom tailored new presidential system of Erdogan, and how it is in regards of checks and balances?
Well, there isn't much checks and balances, honestly speaking.
No checks
Normally,
and balances. No.
well, yeah, no. Okay, the example was the presidential system in the United States, but in the United States, you know, there are like states and the federal state that are kind of balanced. There's a independent judicial branch that is kind of balanced. Seeing the executive branch, you know, the legislative branch is much more harder to get control. But in Turkey, normally, you know, presidents used to be impartial according to the institution, so they weren't supposed to hold any positions in any kind of political parties. Basically, this was the main problem of Erdogan, because he was losing grasp of his party. So the first thing that they canceled was that, you know, to get a hold of the, you know, to give the president the authority to be a member of the party, even, you know, the head of the party, so that he got back the grasp of AKP. And also, you know, when, you know, in Turkish political parties law is giving mainly the whole authority and the responsibility to the head of the party. So the head of the party basically decides who is to be a candidate in, you know, elections, who is to be the congressman, who is to be, you know, yeah, anyway. So basically everything is kind of decided by the head of the party. So basically, when Erdogan is head of the party, he's holding grasp, he's controlling the party, he's controlling the congressman. The congressman can't become candidates again if they go against Erdogan. So he's basically, once he gets the majority in the parliament, he gets control of the parliament. And when he gets control of the parliament, he gets control of the judicial branch as well, because judicial appointments to the judicial branch are done by the president or the parliament. So
would it be fair to say that he cannot tolerate division of power?
well, we can't say that, because, you know, before the switch to the new system, there was a period in which, like, he wasn't at the head of his party, AKP, and like there had to be a new head, you know, Ahmet Davutoğlu, which is kind of a generation younger than Erdogan. And so basically in this period, when he felt like he was losing grasp of the party, he decided to, force him to, he became the prime minister, of course. He forced him to resign and replace him with a low profile prime minister, which basically doesn't do anything else than what he's, told by Erdogan.
So I'll just move on to our next topic, but before I do that, I have one last question. So, you are talking about the replacements, the new diplomats, the newer politicians, younger politicians.
Mm-hmm,
So, the younger generation of neo-Islamists or
mm-hmm,
neo-Ottomans in this case, the
mm-hmm,
neo-Ottoman politicians, like the previous young ministers that you mentioned,
mm-hmm.
why you think they are pushed away by Erdogan?
Well, because once, I mean, the whole media is basically right now 95 or more percent of the Turkish media is controlled by Erdogan and his supporters. So basically, they are being kind of defamated by these media. Whenever they do something that might be against Erdogan, or that is not exactly what Erdogan instructs them to do, they are basically putting in the dartboard of this media, and they are being kind of defamated, and they are getting out of their positions, and even out of the party in the case of former Prime Minister Davutoğlu and former Ministry of Economy Babacan. So basically, Erdogan can't really tolerate anyone else having popularity or like having a different views from himself in the party, apparently.
So, well, I think I can just summarize this by saying that I believe Erdogan has a God complex, because I know that he cannot tolerate criticism a bit, criticism of any sort. And, um, well, yeah, so I will just leave it there. Um,
Well, yeah.
so,
And
and
this new presidential system is, yeah, it's not only in Erdogan, by the way. Even some of his fanatic followers consider himself as the god or the prophet, you may say.
yeah, there was a congressman who said that Erdogan was messenger of Allah. How,
Well,
yeah, yeah, yeah. We don't need to comment on that, I believe.
yeah.
So, with the let's move on to education. So, oh, the Turkish Ministry of Education has been aggressively collaborating with Islamic foundations, charities, associations, schools, and preachers popping up everywhere. 10,000 preacher schools around to that number,
Hmm.
and Quran courses. So, how you think uh, Erdogan is transforming the education system in the Second Republic era? Because that's what I call Erdogan's time. I call it the Second Republic era. The First Republic was by Ataturk, and it was indeed a secular one. This one
Hmm.
is not so much.
Well,
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it Second Republic era. I would call it differently. But anyway, in the education, yes, through Erdogan made Erdogan made thousands of reforms. There is no student in Turkey today that graduated with the same system from any level of education. From when with the time that or she began the school. So basically, every 2 or 3 years, there is a new Ministry of Education. There is a new system introduced. So any student who began, for example, high school ended it with a different system, or that same thing with middle school and primary school. But the thing that didn't change is the inclusion of more religious courses, privatization of education, basically lowering the quality of public schools, so that students should be directed to more private schools. And in private schools, there are generally those religious foundation schools, or even in public schools there are like some agreements to share some parts of the education with these foundations. So basically religious foundations and their private schools and preacher schools were used kind of to Islamize the education, and Islamic education has gone down to primary school, and even before, honestly speaking, under the name of values education, education of moral values. So even in primary schools you can find, for example, people talking about moral values and how you should believe in Allah, etc. Yeah, you can call it brainwash, I guess, because until 12, according to education specialists, until 10 to 12 years old, basically this is not very different from brainwashing children.
Well, I would like to talk about mandatory religious education and what Erdogan does, how he gets a workaround that. So there is this mandatory religious education in Turkey, and the Association of Atheism filed a lawsuit about it in Turkey, and then after the Constitutional Court of Turkey, we went to the European Human Rights Court, and then we won the case after years. And so every education curriculum has a number. Let's say the number is 160. No. Let's say it's 666. So that's the education curriculum number. And then you take this to the European Human Rights Court, and the Human Rights Court makes an decision regarding the education curriculum 666, right?
Mhm.
You know what he does? He makes minor changes in the education curriculum, the same thing in a different color, and then he just calls it, that's the curriculum 667. So now you need to start the whole legal process from square one, and then you need to take it all the way to human rights court, which is around 3 to 5 years. And then after that, you know what happens? He says, "Oh, this
Curriculum
is
668.
668." So yeah, that's a never-ending story, and that's what happens over and over. Um, yeah, so that's how he deals and how he gets around it. He found a loophole. Yeah, um, and the religious education. Those classes are now starting earlier than fourth grade.
Well, yeah,
There
Quran
was this
educations, etc.
there was
Yes.
this guy who is also an elder of Erdogan, Bülent Arınç. He used to be the deputy prime minister in 2015,
Hmm.
14, and he made this statement. They were discussing whether the religious education should go down as low as sixth grade. Yes, now it's starts earlier than fourth grade, but back
Yeah.
then they were discussing if it should go as low as sixth grade. So
Hmm.
anyhow, and you know what he said? He said exactly this: after a certain age, we are having hard time to make the kids believe in certain things. Therefore, we need to pull the religious education age down a few more years so we can indoctrinate them.
Well, it's not only well, that is not something hidden or that they are trying to obstruct. Basically, if you see pro-Erdogan media, there are some column writers that say, okay, you should, for example, tell your girls, force your girls to put, headscarves at the age of 4 or 5, so that she should become feeling it as part of their identity, because in later years it will be harder. So
And
yeah.
there's also this course, now hold tight. There is this course, the values education course, starting at preschool level.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I call it child abuse.
Wow.
So, and also on top of all that, let's give a cherry on top. Evolution is banned from all public and private schools. Like,
Well, yeah, it's got out of curriculum. That's true. Well, they teach. Well, it's actually a hard time for biology teachers as well, because they have to teach, natural selection. They have to teach, mutations and like all the genetic stuff, but they shouldn't teach evolution. Yeah, it's kind of hard time for them.
yeah. So the post-COVID, after Corona, moving on to the next subject, how did the Turkish government handle the pandemic, and what was the first reflex, and what was the support mechanisms the Turkish government offered to its people?
Well, first of all, we didn't have a lockdown because the economy was kind of in a terrible situation. We already had something like a crisis beginning from last year, so we wouldn't be able to afford a total lockdown now. And like, for example, in education, it was, a serious crisis. All the students basically stopped going to schools, and it's the students had to use Zoom, and and Zoom doesn't have Turkish support, by the way. Primary school students can't really use Zoom because they can't really speak English, and there was no infrastructure. There was no internet infrastructure, especially in rural areas. So basically, all these students were kind of, how you can say, kind of quitted, or they were um, kind of empty without any education for some months, we can say. And afterwards, nowadays, there's like an education portal that is kind of working, but still the internet infrastructure is not nice. Of course, the role of these religious foundations increase. Apart from that, there's like, in the pandemic side of it, well,
What was the first government response to the pandemic? Do you remember?
like what?
I
What do you
believe
mean?
it was additional prayer calls.
Oh,
They started additional prayer calls to
yes.
protect people from coronavirus.
Well, yes, they started. Normally, these additional prayer calls are, done when there's someone who dies for some reason. They make these additional prayer calls for the person who died, and they call for his prayer of funeral. But then they began doing this from all the mosques around Turkey, and there are lots of mosques, honestly speaking, and even there
90,000
is no
plus.
one dying.
90,000 plus buildings we are talking about.
Well, yeah, exactly. So and of even when there is no one who died, there is no funeral prayer to be done in this mosque. And in the name of martyrs for corona, basically, they began putting these additional prayer calls, and then they stopped it abruptly because they understood that it's negatively impacting public morale against the pandemic, but still it was, yeah, as if it was some, protective measure. We had additional prayer calls for some 2 months, I
So one
guess.
thing, one thing Turkey has lots and lots and loads of is imams and preachers. Why?
Exactly.
Because according to a 2018 Reuters research, there is 1.3 million students in preacher schools alone in Turkey currently studying in 2018. Now it's probably around the same number, if not more. And that's 4,000 plus preacher schools in Turkey. I'm talking about only one kind of school, Imam Hatip high schools. And there is also different Quran courses and different religious schools of different institutions, not those. Those are only the
Hmm.
governments. And um, so what happened was that with that many imams under your hand in Corona, there was a Corona hotline, COVID hotline, for people to, ask for health questions, to ask, consult about the symptoms, ask for help or whatnot.
Um,
Imams were responding to those calls. When you call the Corona hotline, in a day or two, they send you an imam. You are making a health call, and that's who you get in return, a preacher. So, so yeah, that happened. And please go ahead.
well, the main strategy of Turkey against Corona was to put affiliation teams, basically, that follows every case, who shows symptoms, and then tests them, etc. But when the pandemic got out of control, especially when people began traveling in like Eid al-Adha or Eid al-Ramadan, you know, uh, they begin not being able to, follow every case and every, case who had a contact with the proven cases. So they had to put every government employee that they could find in these affiliation teams. And this is basically imams, drivers, I don't know, dentists, doctors, they are okay, but teachers who go and collect samples from people who had proven contact.
You
So
have
yeah.
used the term. You have used the term. You said proven case. That's not
Oh yeah.
a common term in, to Canadians or others. Like, what is a proven case? That's another thing we need to shine light to, because like in Turkey, the corona case definition is a little bit different, right? Not the
Yes,
same as the
yes.
World Health Organization. Health Organization says that even if you are not tested positive, even
Hmm.
if you are not tested positive, if you are symptoms, you are reported as a case.
Yes, exactly.
Turkish
Well,
definition. Turkish definition now. Hold tight. Even if you are tested positive, if you don't have symptoms, you are not counted in as a case, even if you are tested positive.
exactly.
So, yeah, so, I mean, you know, it's really sad, very sad if you are living in Turkey, but watching it from abroad, like, it's sometimes hilarious what they do. You just cannot hold yourself, you cannot keep yourself from laughing. This is absurd. That's not heard of. That's, yeah.
I mean, the lack of transparency was, since the beginning, it was a real issue here, because basically, there are researchers who want to make research on COVID cases and their prevalence in different parts of population. I don't know whether it's more seen in male population, female population, but basically the Ministry of Health said that, okay, if you want data, you should come to me first. I will approve your research and then you should do the research. So basically we have no idea about who's tested positive. And even doctors, we had like union of medical doctors. They kind of leak some data or some information. They kind of leaked that the information presented by the Ministry of Health is kind of nonsense. But still, when you consider the number of people who tested positive, yeah, the numbers are much higher apparently, because basically if you are tested positive, they don't even, normally you should be in lockdown in your house, isolating from everyone else, but still they send you back in public transport because they don't have means to send you, back home.
So with this, I'd like to move on to our next topic, which is the social media censorship law.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah, that's an entertaining one. Now, um, can you fill us in terms of what's going on with that new censorship law? There has been a few others passed within the past decade, but this is different. This is big. This is
The
like
final stone.
yeah, this is like asking for a cover charge for from corporations if you wanna set foot to Turkey. Can you explain us what the hell is going on?
Well, in Turkey, the grasp of AKP and Erdogan in media has been growing, and now if turn on the TV, 95% of all the channels that you will see will be pro Erdogan, will live broadcast Erdogan whenever and wherever he speaks. So basically, there's not much to do for the opposition. There's no freedom at all in mainstream media. So basically, most of the people kind of decide to not to watch the mainstream TVs, and they use social media. They use Ekşi, which is a local social media hub, you can say. They use YouTube, etc. So this area of freedom for all the opposition, the women, the LGBT, the people that the government doesn't really like that much, and tries to ostracize from society. Basically, this area also needs to be kind of clean and according to law and regulated, right? So we had this new social media law that passed in June, in the middle of pandemic for some reason. And according to this new social media law, any company, any company that's offering at least 1 million users in Turkey have to open up an office here, put a legal representative, put all the user data in Turkey, and response to legal requests whenever they try. And also there's if they don't, they will be charged 1 million euro at the beginning, but if they continue not complying with the new law, they will be they will their bandwidth will be reduced to 10%, will be reduced by 90%. And yes, so by the end of next April, I think we will have 10% of our bandwidth to Facebook, more or less, because most companies like Facebook, Google, Instagram, TikTok, they kind of refused to comply with the law, and they basically were fined 1 million euro, I think, last week. Apart from that, I can also say that it's also another mean, the right to be forgotten. I think we should also mention that. The one of the main motives is the right to be forgotten, which is in Germany normally. When there's like news about some car crash and someone killed, they publish the name of the person who hit the victim, and normally that person has the right to be forgotten in like 10 years after that case. You don't want to come up in the search internet searches, right? That's how right to be forgotten works in Germany. But in Turkey, apparently they want to use it for covering up the internet history and search history of maybe Google for their maybe corruption cases or any other case that they want, apparently.
So, in other words, if you are a social media giant, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all these platforms, if you have more than 1 million subscribers in Turkey, you need to
Mhm.
pay Turkish government $1 million license fee to operate in Turkey. And not only that, you need to open an office in Turkey. You need to store all of your data in Turkey. And whenever a Turkish court asks you who shared that post, you need to give them the IP address and all the
And
information.
the port as well, exactly. So normally in there's like this thing, normally
Can you
before.
imagine how it can be used for blasphemy? Like, wow, I cannot. Like, there's
Yeah,
hundreds and
exactly.
thousands of lawsuits there.
Uh,
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
normally there is this thing. Normally, like for example, in home networks, for example, there might be multiple users, but they still share the same IP. So it was a way of getting anonymity in the internet, you can say, and it was a way that you know when the website gives, okay, this post was published by this IP address, and when they investigate that IP address, it's basically that IP address may be used by multiple users, so they can't identify who used it. So it was a way that gives you some anonymity, but they also added the port information, so they will precisely know who did the
we
post.
also have this agency in Turkey. It's called RTÜK, which is
Hmm.
a department, an agency to regulate. What it means is Regulation Council of Public Broadcast.
Hmm.
So its job is to regulate TV stations and radio stations, so that they don't air indecent stuff, or they don't show cigarettes and alcohol and some sexual scenes. Erdogan has a dream. He he connected the Turkish YouTube and Netflix access to the Regulation Council of Public Broadcast, who
Exactly.
used
Hmm.
to regulate the Turkish TVs and radio stations. So
Well,
they are
recently
also in
they
charge of regulating Netflix and the YouTube.
exactly. So they're how can I say, their point of interest recently has been the presence of LGBT in LGBT roles or characters in any kind of series or movies, etc. So basically, it's like their it's like a big no, apparently. So there was a Netflix movie that were supposed to have a Netflix local movie, like Turkish series, that was supposed to have a gay character, and then it was just stopped because Rütük said no, we won't approve that. Okay, so that's one of their sensitive points, and a part of that, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, there is a Turkish series in one of the mainstream TV channels. Its name is Sadakatsiz. It means
Unfaithful.
disloyal.
Disloyal.
unfaithful or disloyal. It's about some woman's extra marriage relation with someone else, or and it was actually forced to pay a fine for being showing unmoral stuff, which is not even illegal in Turkey, by the way, showing immoral stuff as normal to the Turkish public.
Yeah.
Yes. True.
So, well,
Thanks.
now the economy of Turkey. Um, what is the currency situation, and how does these corruption cases affect the Turkish economy? For example, when I first moved to Canada, one Canadian dollar was one Turkish lira 84 cents,
Mhm.
1.84 Turkish lira. Now, one Canadian dollar
When
is
was it, by the way?
6.50. I moved here 5 years ago, so that's what's happened within the past 5 years,
Mhm.
from 2016 to 2020. Not even five.
Might be 7 now, by the way. Honestly
Yeah,
speaking.
now wow. So that's so like the interest rates, the inflation rates, the increasing taxes. You know, can you tell us a bit more about that? For example, I heard that there's the contractor gang of five construction companies. Can you tell us a little bit about more about the gang of five, and also the increasing taxes and the inflation, and where it's going right now? By the way, we need to get a faster pace because we are already 50 minutes in, and
Uh-huh.
we are like at the 60% of
Yeah,
the
okay. So
that, kind of.
after 2009 financial crisis, basically United States pumped dollar in international markets, and like in the abundance of dollars, basically Turkish economy kind of you know thought that it will be eternal. Okay, so these construction companies, they signed tenders from the government contracts, uh, and that are really draining public finance, we can say, and that will drain public finance for another 25 years because they were very long-term contracts, and this the debt is to be calculated in dollars or in euros, and as the currency ramps up, the public debt is growing. So that's one thing, and also with the corruption cases, basically we had this loss of trust by investors after the presidential system. Even domestic investors aren't really trusting the system, because basically the legal guarantees and right of property, they are kind of at risk, I can say. So yeah, whenever, like, even Turkish people are holding their money in dollars in like foreign exchange, I think the rate passed above half. More than half of the deposits in Turkish banks now are in foreign exchange, so not in Turkish lira accounts, because basically Turkish lira, with the inflation rate and negative real interest rate, is not really proposing anything to investors.
So, well, about the contractor gang of five construction companies.
Mhm.
Um, is there any government pressure, or like is there any investigation going about it whatsoever?
No.
They
Like
are.
they even if there were some investigation, they would kind of be stopped, I suppose. I mean, they normally these are huge construction companies, and they should actually be giving huge amounts of taxes, but they're they don't pay taxes, and their tax debts are actually being canceled by the parliament. So yeah, that's
So Turkey is getting poorer and poorer. That's what I see. Turkish people are getting poor. Turkish currency is losing value. Same with Erdogan's wealth.
well, that's a
Are
bit
they
of
parallel? Because
speculation.
that's what you would think, right? So how is Erdogan's hidden wealth uh, doing with all this? Like, is he also getting poorer, or what's going on at that end? I know that you live in Turkey and you cannot comment much.
Well, that's kind of
Yeah.
speculation, but I can give an example about this. In 2018, there was a priest who was arrested in Turkey, American priest, by the way,
What was his name?
priest Brunson,
Priest
priest
Brunson.
Brunson case.
Most of you
Yes, he
may
was.
remember that
Yeah,
case.
yeah. If you remember that case. Okay, so Priest Brunson was arrested for assisting FETÖ in or assisting terrorist organizations. I don't remember whether it was FETÖ or something else. And then, Fethullah Gülen, the leader of FETÖ, is living in the United States, and Erdogan said, "Okay, just give us the imam and get the priest." And we have an independent judiciary that they don't comply with what we tell them. So we can't really have him released. Trump was pressuring Erdogan for his release, and then suddenly there
And
were.
Erdogan also made a statement saying that he would not let the priest go as long as he's in power. So that's how strongly he felt about that.
Yes, exactly.
What happened next?
And then Trump began talking about, sanctions against Turkey, and then there were rumors about, Senate investigation about Erdogan's wealth abroad, and
So
then
the U.S. Senate was proposed an investigation on Erdogan's wealth that's overseas or also in the United States. So U.S. Senate
exactly.
was gonna run an investigation on Erdogan.
Oh yeah, and then the priest was released.
How many hours?
I don't remember how many hours.
In a
Rumors
day's
don't come
time,
out.
or maybe
Yeah,
2 days?
in less than a week, I can say.
Yeah.
In less than a week, the priest was released, and then he's now back in United States. He immediately returned to United States. Exactly.
That's how scared he is from his wealth being investigated by legal.
Well, that's kind of speculative, that part, but that's yeah.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to the international issues of Turkey. By the way, I see that we have many questions piling up in the chat area. Please keep writing your questions. We will get to them hopefully within the next 25 minutes. Now, let's try to wrap up all these topics 5 minutes each if we can. Now, the first international issue that comes to mind is the Eastern Mediterranean crisis, as we call it in Turkey. What I'm talking about is the Greek islands at the Aegean and the Cyprus, around the Cyprus island in Mediterranean. So the natural gas and petroleum searches in the seabed at those areas. This is a conflict, an issue that goes back to 100 years. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Char?
Well, yes, that's a long-term issue between Greece and Turkey that has, a long history back to the foundation of Turkey and the treaties between Turkey and Greece, and then there are some international law that came into force after those treaties, but Turkey didn't sign them. But still, so that is a hard issue to solve, honestly speaking, because both sides are kind of right in what they are saying. But this is like a friction issue that is nowadays kind of being sold under the name of NATO, because both countries are members of NATO. But there is this normally, according to the law of the sea, that was the international agreement about these matters that was signed in 1982 and came into force in 1990s. All countries have right to extend their territorial exclusive economic zone to 12 miles, but in Greek, like in Aegean Sea and in Eastern Mediterranean, when Greece increases their exclusive economic zone to 12 miles, basically it's they kind of become another controlling power from the Straits of Turkey, the straits that allow passage from Black Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. So that is one of the strategic reasons why Turkey is considering this as a casus belli, like reason for war. And it was some issue that was there since 20 years or so, since 100 years, but that was an issue of friction that wasn't solved in the last 3 decades at least. When the issue of natural gas in the Eastern Mediterranean came up, possible reserves, it was reheated, we can say, and came into force with the addition of Cyprus. Cyprus is another issue in Eastern Mediterranean, and southern Cyprus, basically administrated by Greeks, didn't really want to share its portion of gas with northern part of Cyprus, which is administrated by Turks, and this kind of ramped up and reheated the issue, and finally we have some international issue that is trying to be solved with help of NATO, but also since Greece and Cyprus are members of EU is also a part of this conflict. And yes, I mean that is actually not very controversial among Turkish parties. We can say, Turkish parties have some kind of consensus about protection of Turkey's rights in Eastern Mediterranean, but the means of struggling for the rights of Eastern Mediterranean rights of Turkey are disputed, I can say.
Yeah, that's one of the few areas where the Turkish political parties have a common ground.
Kind of consent, yeah.
And well, let's move on to the Libya issue.
Well, yes, Libya.
What's going on in Libya? What is the Turkish involvement? There is a civil war going on in Libya between the East and the West. And is Turkey interfering with the country's civil war? And is Turkey breaking the isolation?
Well, exactly. Normally, Libya is supposed to be in embargo, for arms embargo, but countries don't really comply with it. And Turkey wanted to break its isolation in the case of Eastern Mediterranean, because we have basically frozen relations with Israel, Egypt, and we don't have any relations with Cyprus, and we have not that great relations with Greece. So basically, Turkey was kind of in isolation in the resolution for Eastern Mediterranean issue. So in order to break this isolation, we signed an agreement with the we can say Western government of Libya, about the eastern territorial waters of Libya. And Western government of Libya was in a poor condition in the civil war at that time, and like so Turkey, in as a way to help Western government not to collapse as a result of civil war, kind of had to send military help, like Turkish soldiers and drones, to Western government of Libya, as in order to preserve this treaty of Eastern Mediterranean territorial waters. So yeah, and also they some mercenaries from Syrian zones were also sent to Libya. I think that's also publicly known.
How many international laws does that break? Sorry, wrong question. I should many, many. Okay. So the next thing is, I believe, Syria, the Syrian issue. Erdogan and Assad used to be buddies. They used to go to vacations together and spend.
Yeah, in 2011, yes.
Yeah, well, what happened and how did they become enemies? I mean, not that Assad is seeing Erdogan as an enemy, not that I believe he cares much, but Erdogan has strong emotions about Assad. Where do you think that comes from? What's going on there? Why has Erdogan changed his position 180 degrees within months and then turned all against Assad? Because, like, even though Syria is a religious state by constitution, Syria is a much more secular state than today's Turkey, like in terms of education, in terms of having multiple official languages, in terms of having religious classes for different, not only for Islam but for different religions in different languages. So yeah, like and not mandatory, of course. So yeah, Syria was a big defeat both for Trump and Erdogan. Defeat in
Well,
the place, I think. I mean, Turkey tried to intervene with the internal affairs of Syria to replace Assad regime with an Islamic agenda in mind, because Erdogan has been caught many times, multiple times, red-handed, while he was supporting the Free Syrian Army, the army of the opposition, the Islamists against Assad rule. So and what's Turkey has been supporting them, and then what happened? Turkey ended up with 4 million plus, mostly Islamist refugees, which may be seen as a burden to Turkish economy and social pattern. So yeah, like how did their love story turn into this tornado?
Well, after the Arab Spring in 2011 that began in Tunisia, basically all the old Arab regimes were, stepping down one after the other and one after another. So first Tunisia, then Egypt. Then when revolts begin, and at that time, Turkey was seen as a, like a nice harmony of Islam and democratic state at that time. So basically, it was seen as a role model for Arab countries. Erdogan was seen as a role leader for like model leader for Arab leaders, and Erdogan got into this fantasy of supporting, being the leader of the Islamic countries around the Middle East, and their ideology is kind of similar with Muslim Brotherhood, which is a Islamist organization that was founded in at the beginning of 20th century, I suppose.
Muslim Brotherhood also happens to be an ally of Erdogan.
Exactly. Well, they were, hosting Hamas leaders in their party congresses, etc. Hamas is internationally recognized as a terrorist organization, but okay. Anyway, so as part of these dreams, basically, Erdogan thought that just after Tunisia and Egypt, Syria's leader Assad would also have to step down. So in order to replace him, we would, support Islamist oppositions in Syria, and have a much more favorable leader in Syria than Assad. Assad wasn't really the best friend, but they were nice buddies. They were becoming more and more friendly, but still, yeah, like, no government is better than a government that you put there, right? So basically, Erdogan got into the stream of replacing Assad government with more Islamist government that they actually support. And at the end, we had this millions of refugees, not only from Syria, also from other countries, but in majority they are from Syria. And honestly speaking, there are like many Islamist groups that come in and out of Turkey. That's true.
So Erdogan has been supporting the opposition forces, which are usually the terrorist forces in Syria, and Turkish leader has been arming them to teeth, giving them, training, health support, all these. And Turkish border is not a strict border. They just pass. They just go through as they wish.
Well, Free Syrian Army is not internationally recognized as a terrorist organization, except Syria, of course, as far as I know. But in the battleground, apparently there are like some fighter groups that fight for, whoever is powerful in that area, and like apparently they have like not that far from each other ideologies, honestly speaking. So even United States and other international organizations are having difficulties in determining who is to be determined as a terrorist organization and who is not. So basically, if they are considering an Islamic government only in Syria, they are considered more plausible for West and for Turkey. And if they are considering an Islamic government for not only for Syria, but also for the Western countries, which is jihad, apparently. So if their jihad's aim is only Syria, then they are kind of accepted. But if their jihad's aim is also Western countries, then that's, that's the terrorist organization. So in this case, Al-Nusra was first not considered a terrorist organization. Then, when they switched they made a minor change in their ideology. They became terrorist organization. But still, these changes are happening, after you give them the arms. So
yeah, so Erdogan has been denying that he has been arming and supporting these groups. That's the official line.
Well, they are arming Free Syrian Army, and then those arms may be passed to other or those fighter groups may be passed to other switching sides, but that's not.
But
their
then
issue,
again,
they say.
arming Free Syrian Army is also done under the table. And
Yeah.
so there was a couple journalists, Can Dündar being one of them, who discovered and kind of caught them red-handed while they were transferring truckloads of arms to Syria, and the records were showing that it was humanitarian aid, like food or drugs. So now, what happened to those journalists after they kind of proved that Erdogan was lying to the international community or to his people in that case? What happened? Like, where are these journalists now?
Can Dündar escaped to Germany, as far as I
On
know.
exile. Yeah, they are on
Yeah,
exile
on exile.
in
Yeah,
Germany.
exactly. On
So,
asylum, not really like in a natural way.
if they come back
Uh,
to Turkey, they, I think there's a cell waiting for them. There will like they will be arrested for sure, and they will be
yeah, yeah,
imprisoned
exactly.
for a long time because they
Probably.
are being charged with what, treason, something like that.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not sure. Yeah. Hmm.
So,
Actually, I think his properties in Turkey were.
not treason, something else. Sorry. Um, but
I think it's disclosing information that should not be disclosed in the
yeah,
name of
the closing
national
top secret
security. Yes.
information regarding national security, something like that, which
Yeah.
is a heavy thing. Um, well, let's not get into the journalism in Turkey and the journalists because that's another topic. Now, let's move on a little bit more northeast. Let's go towards Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hmm.
Armenia is a state which is not officially recognized by Turkey.
No,
Uh,
it is recognized.
it is recognized by Turkey, Armenia.
Yes, actually, Turkey is one of the first countries to recognize Armenia, but we don't have official relations,
I'm sorry.
and
Okay,
our
yeah,
border is
we
closed. Yeah.
recognize them, but we don't have official relations, an embassy, a diplomatic channel, and or a
Yeah,
border
exactly.
process. Nothing like that. So yeah, and Azerbaijan is basically, uh, uh, you know,
Our one nation, two states friend.
that's
Yeah,
that's a slogan, right? One nation, two
yeah,
states. It's like their,
yeah.
it's like our sister state. No pun intended. But so what happens? Like, what is going on there, and what happens next? Because there is a war, there is hot action, and both sides of the border have strong national feelings
Hmm.
and have been brainwashed to hate each other through the history courses in their education curriculums.
You can say that.
And
Hmm.
after the collapse of USSR,
Hmm.
20% of the Azerbaijan territory was occupied by Armenians,
Hmm.
because the central region was ethnically Armenian. And Russia has been siding with Armenia for the past few decades. That's how they survived. That's, why the conflict continued this long.
Hmm.
Now, the Azerbaijan army is modernized with the help of Turkey. But the Azerbaijan army updated their military doctrines with NATO
Hmm.
and Western doctrines, and Armenian army is still using the USSR military doctrine
Hmm.
as far as the war strategy and tactics. Now, Azerbaijan is taking back the territory, and since they are using the sophisticated Turkish drones, they are a little bit more advanced. I can understand that, but yes, that is a clear advantage. But Armenia is backed by Russia, right? So, in other
Hmm.
words, it's a proxy war between Turkey and Russia has big toys, not drones.
Right. Yeah.
Turkey, it has the big guns. So, the drones are for foreplay. So,
Uh-huh.
Russia is not backing Armenia too much, I think, because, the leader of Armenia right now has
Hmm.
turned his face to Western Europe and West Europe, and like, also has been going after um, the pro-Russian politicians, trying to throw
Hmm.
them into jail, the previous pro-Russian politicians. So now I believe Armenia is kind of paying the price for not being a good boy.
Well,
from a
from the
Russian
side of
lens.
Russia,
Well,
yes.
well, what do you think?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I think. Kind of, yeah. Now, Armenia is trying to get support from friends, from the United States, the countries that have been part of the, in the peace talks between Azerbaijan and Armenia, called Minsk Group. But France and United States are not in a position to help Armenia at this case in the middle of pandemic and in economic turmoil. And Russia is not willing to help Pashinyan, the Armenian prime minister, because he's wanting to be Western ally. More speaking honestly. So and Putin, they actually have a collective security agreement, Armenia and Russia. So if the battle comes to Armenian territory, then Russia will intervene. But since the battle is now happening in Azerbaijan territory, as internationally known, Putin will not intervene with this. Like Putin said that they will not intervene with this, like several times, because Pashinyan is insisting calling Putin every day. Actually, today we had a new development in this case, in this issue. Azerbaijan army liberated Shusha, which is the cultural center, one of the culturally and historically significant cities in Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh territory. Or Shusha is fallen from the Armenian point of view. Turkish drones actually have been really a factor that that supported the morale of the Azerbaijan army and Azerbaijan people, because basically Azerbaijan Ministry of Defense is publishing videos in which they are like hunting Armenian soldiers with joystick, like playing a video game since the beginning of the clashes in September 27. So this is something that keeps the morale up in Azerbaijan side and also in Turkey side, of course. But yeah, in Azerbaijan side, it's a way to I think continue the war, but I think they are kind of insisting on liberating all the occupied territories. But from the Turkish side, all the mostly nationalist people are kind of proud of our sophisticated drones that are effective in the warfare.
Hadn't Armenia been flirting with the West, and hadn't Armenia been going after the previous administration's pro-Russian politicians?
Yes, they
Then do you
do.
think this war would come this far, and do you think Russia would have already put a stop to that show? Because
Well,
Azerbaijan is also a former Soviet republic as well. So
yes, I mean
we all know how much
Azerbaijan-Russia
power.
relations. Yeah, Azerbaijan-Russia relations are not that you know uh, that friendly, but still it is kind of friendly because they have historic ties as well. But like personally, my opinion is that if Pashinyan kind of resigns, I think Putin will kind of find a way to intervene. I mean, Azerbaijan and Armenia both agreed to a peace force, some kind of peace force between them, because their border is very unstable in this case. So in my opinion, if Pashinyan resigns and which would mean some kind of pro-Russian government coming up, I think Putin would interfere, but Putin is not, or Russia is not really willing to get in there as far as I can see right now. I mean, from what I have observed from Turkish news and from international news. Apart from that, Armenia is actually a kind of isolated country, because in the north they have Georgia, that they also have border disputes. In the east they had Azerbaijan, they have a border dispute. And Armenia doesn't recognize internationally recognized Turkey-Armenia border. So they kind of consider the border between Turkey and Armenia a disputed border, and they consider some parts of eastern Turkey as Armenian territory, historically Armenian territory. So the border between Turkey and Armenia is also closed. The only border that is left is Iran, but Iran is not really the best country to have arms talk with, because basically Iran is not liked by any of West. So Pashinyan now is between, if he wants the support of the West, he has to, get rid of Iran somehow, and he wants to survive. Basically, honestly speaking, I mean, from what I have observed, like Pashinyan is sending all the youth to the war in Karabakh, and like it's not only males, not only youth, honestly speaking, also old people, and they also began conscripting females into the army, and so I believe this war, even if it stops right now, will be a issue. It will be a demographic problem for Armenia, honestly speaking, and I don't really see how they can get out of this.
I see. Well, moving on to our last topic before we start to our Q&A. Let's talk a little bit about the Charlie Hebdo, Samuel Paty, and the Erdogan Macron disagreement. So, yeah, disagreement. That's how I put it. The well, how do we do an introduction to this? So I will the secularism in France and the secularism in Turkey are not interpreted the same.
Apparently, yes.
Yeah, the French state does not intervene with religion. In Turkey used to have an agency to regulate the religious affairs, so that Islam doesn't intervene with the social life. It's called Diyanet İşleri, which is the Department of Religious Affairs. However, that same agency has now became the state's Ministry of Propaganda for Sunni Islam. So, the Turkish state also provides religious services. And the government has been run by an extremely pro-Islamic party for the past 2 decades. Erdogan and Macron dispute, I believe, began when a Chechen student beheaded the teacher Samuel Paty, because he showed cartoons of Muhammad during a class about freedom of expression. Now, the French President Macron supported the teacher and issued a Legion of Honor posthumously. But in response to the French government, also French government projected the same cartoon to government buildings. Some cities did that, if I remember correctly. And so that's where the French government stands. Erdogan reacted in his usual way and questioned the mental health of Macron, and he called for a boycott. So can you elaborate more on that?
Well, in this subject, we can say that the recent dispute started, as you said, but I mean, in terms of the difference of interpretation of secularism between France and Turkey, I think it also began when not only France but also Germany wanted to start, launch, Islamic theology programs in their universities, or promote them in a way to, recruit their own imams so that they will be more independent from Turkey, because in the present system, imams in French and German mosques, or actually in the mosques that are built by Turkey, the imams are sent from Turkey, and this is, another way of propaganda in, Germany, in Turkish minority, and in France as well. So instead of that, Macron said that France is a big nation, and it should be able to create its own Islam that is independent from Islam of, Tunisia, Turkey, Algeria, whoever is building the mosque. Germany also has an initiative like that. Actually, this is one of the ways that would, put Turkey aside in the Muslim minorities in European countries. So this is actually the root starting point of the dispute. But this recent issue of Samuel Paty and, the death of the killing of Samuel Paty, and actually beheading of Samuel Paty is actually filled up the dispute. Well, nowadays there aren't really many statements from both sides, from France and from Erdogan, about this, because, with the election of Biden, I think the focus in the foreign okay, so we can say, for example, Erdogan has to have some foreign leader to be the other fighter. Okay, it has to, constantly have some opponent. So Macron was that opponent for 1 or 2 weeks, and nowadays that issue is kind of settled down. Not really settled down, but put into hibernation, we can say. And now I believe with the election of Biden, we will have a new opponent. Because Biden, during his election campaign, stated lots of stuff that is against today's Turkish policies. So nowadays, our external force, that external opponent that we have to use, that AKP has to use to consolidate its base, is changing. So
Pointing fingers is the game. Thank you, Çağrı, for an enlightening and entertaining conversation. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are Canada's only national nonprofit for science and free thought. We hope that those of you who are not already members will consider purchasing a membership. We will include a link to our membership page in the chat window and through Meetup. I hope that you will consider joining. Not only does your membership provide financial support to CFIC, it also adds your voice to that of others who support science, critical thinking, and secularism. As we grow in numbers, so does our influence with government decision makers and the public opinion that guides them. We advocate for evidence-based decisions on government policy, healthcare, and public education, and human rights. If concerns like climate change, blasphemy laws, education curriculum, medical pseudoscience are important to you, please become a CFIC member. In today's landscape, there are too many people spreading misinformation and trying to mislead you. Without us, The major influencers will continue to be the large, self interested groups and institutions that benefit from making baseless claims and spreading pseudoscientific nonsense. So please consider a membership. It's only $30 per year. Finally, I would like to thank to the CFIC Victoria and virtual branch volunteers who pulled this event together. If you would like to volunteer with CFIC, you can sign up on our website. There are many interesting positions for you to choose from. Now I'm gonna try to unmute all of your microphones. So let's please give our speaker a big round of applause. But well, we don't have many people left. And I don't know if I will be able to do that, but oops, mute all. Now unmute. I don't have, okay. Ask all to unmute. Yes, I did it. Okay, so I think I have managed to unmute already. So let's unmute the microphones and let's please give our speaker a big round of applause. Thank you. Thank you everybody for coming and have a great night. Until next time.